Do you feel frustrated trying to grow your franchise? Are you having trouble balancing your consumer and franchise development marketing? Do you wish there was an easier way? Imagine if you had a proven roadmap to take your franchise's marketing from costing you to making you money. That's why we've created the Franchise Growth Blueprint. We walk you through the exact same process that we use to run franchise marketing campaigns for our clients at scale that has resulted in triple-digit growth. This blueprint isn't for anyone. It's not for people just starting a franchise. It's not for franchises without long-term goals. This is for franchises that want to scale up their marketing in a predictable and profitable way using a proven roadmap. If you want to sell more franchises, keep your current franchisees happy, and learn from people who have already done it, go to franchisegrowthblueprint.com and sign up today. That's franchisegrowthblueprint.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Franchise Marketing Podcast. This week we have Christine Kelly from Little Kickers. Christine, welcome.
Hi, how are you doing, Jordan?
Doing well. How about yourself?
Yeah, really good. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
No problem. It's great to have you on. So for our listeners who don't know you, mind giving them a brief introduction of yourself and Little Kickers?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Christine Kelly. I'm originally from the UK, although I now live in Toronto. I've been in Canada for 11 years now, and I'm actually half Canadian, half British. But I grew up in the UK, and I set up Little Kickers in London, England back in 2002 when I had a son who was 2 years old. At the time, I was working for JP Morgan on their graduate scheme and really struggling with the whole kind of work-life balance. It was a pretty kind of full-on job that I had. So I decided to take a little bit of time off. I spent a lot of time with my son, and we were, spending a lot of time playing soccer, or football as we call it in England. And I couldn't find anybody who was able to teach him from the age of 2. So I decided that I would set up some classes for him myself, and really it all kind of grew from there.
Wow, that I love it, because the most brilliant ideas always come from a personal need and actually solving it. So I'm curious, why did you decide to go down the franchise route?
I quickly found that there was a lot of demand for the classes that I set up in the UK. The pilot got oversubscribed by 400%, and I kept on getting requests from different areas of London to open more classes. After about a year, I'd got to 35 classes a week, and it was starting to become a pretty full-time job for me. And I was spending a lot of time managing coaches and trying to make sure that the quality of what I was doing was maintained. And I kept on getting more and more requests from people to open classes. So I decided that really I had to kind of sit down and have a think before I was completely overwhelmed with work as to what would be a good way of expanding the business while maintaining the quality of what we did. And really at that point, I didn't know a whole lot about franchising. Obviously I'd heard of McDonald's and things like that, but it wasn't a business format that I was at all familiar with. And so I just came across it really when I was researching ways that it kind of just ticked a lot of the boxes I was looking to tick. So I knew there were a lot of other people out there who were struggling with work-life balance. At the time, I was particularly cognizant of the fact a lot of my female friends had gone back to work after they had kids and were really struggling to kind of, manage the whole work-life balance thing. And so really our first few franchisees ended up being kind of women who are very much like myself from professional backgrounds, but who had young kids. So it ticked that box. It also ticked the box of being able to be a format that would allow me to grow the business, but maintain the quality of what we did. So obviously, with a franchise, if you don't maintain the quality, if you're running preschool, football, soccer classes, then people aren't going to sign up and come to classes. So it was something that I knew the quality would be maintained. The franchisees, I thought, would have a vested interest in growing their businesses and developing them. And it ticked a lot of the boxes in terms of expansion. I didn't really want to just have a business that I would run in London and that was it. I wanted to have something a lot bigger than that. So yeah, I stumbled across franchising, and it ticked so many of the boxes that I was looking to have ticked that logically it seemed a sensible route to go down.
Very cool. So now you have over 300 franchisees across 6 continents. So that's huge growth over the past, I think, 18 years now. So could you tell me more about what that journey has been like?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, initially, the franchise grew through word of mouth. So kind of right back to the start. Initially, it was me. I set up the 35 classes a week, which was equivalent to roughly 3 franchises that I was running myself at that time. And then I realized that I would soon exhaust my own capacity for setting up new classes and, the amount of time I had available to run the business. So we were actually approached by a lady from Northwest London, Julia, back in 2004, and she became our first franchisee. And at the time, I just suggested to her that franchising might be a good route to go down. And she seemed very keen. And I explained to her that I actually didn't really know a whole lot about franchising, but I was very happy to work as closely as I could with her, and that, her success was my top priority, and that I would do everything I could to try and make sure that I gave her all of the infrastructure and support and everything else that she needed to set up and run her own business in the same way as I'd set up and run my kind of 35 classes a week. So she became the first franchisee, and she's still with us. Absolutely fantastic. She's sold off chunks of her area because I got the sizing of the area completely wrong. I made it absolutely enormous, and so she's sold off a few. She's still got a couple of franchises left. And really kind of it grew from there, but it grew very much through word of mouth. We didn't advertise for franchisees probably about the first 10 years or so. People would just contact us because they were interested in setting up little kickers in the local area. And a lot of the time it was either coaches who'd worked for franchisees in the network, it was friends of friends, it was family, a whole range of ex-customers. But we sold 25 franchises in 2005, and that was our first year of franchising, and that was through word of mouth. So after that, we just kind of thought, actually, let's just continue to expand it. Why not? And the international route was a bit trickier, and I guess it was kind of a bit intimidating because there's so much of it at the time that was unknown that it would have been easier to just say, right, I'm just going to stick with the UK and carry on doing that. But I didn't really want to do that. And we kept getting approached by people from overseas who wanted to buy franchises. So eventually I thought, right, I'm going to do a bit of research. I'm going to chat to other companies who've sold franchises overseas and just get some feedback from them as to how best to go about doing that. And without exception, they all said, don't do it. It's an absolute nightmare. You'll end up getting sued. You'll have to go and live in Australia for 6 months to fight lawsuits, et cetera, et cetera. And so I kind of thought, ooh, that sounds a bit intimidating. But ultimately, I felt like if I continued to work really closely with the franchisees I had overseas and build a relationship of trust with them, to the extent that I felt confident that if they had any issues with the way the business was operating or being run or the support they would receive, that they would ring me rather than kind of, contacting a franchise lawyer in their local city to try and take legal action against my company, then I felt like I had a pretty good basis for a relationship with them. And so right from the start, we've had, as an organization, very, very close relationships with all of our franchisees overseas. Like, I'll go out and visit them quite regularly and things like that. And I think that's been the key to, minimizing any kind of legal action or anything like that, making us feel comfortable to continue expanding into different jurisdictions overseas.
Wow, very cool. That is quite the journey. So you briefly touched on it, but I'd love to unpack this more about how you're maintaining that very tight and close-knit relationship with your franchisees, especially at scale now.
Yeah, I mean, that is probably the biggest challenge as the business grows, how you maintain that. I think right from the start, we've been so lucky with the franchisees we've taken on because they've come from such a broad range of backgrounds. And there's really, things that we can learn from all of them in terms of their past experience and how they go about running their business. So also kind of, every day I recognize that they're the ones who are on the ground interacting with customers, finding out what customer requirements are. They're using the systems that we've put in place. So they're the best placed people to tell us how to improve what we do. And they're also the ones who are seeing what the competitive landscape looks like and how it's evolving. So really, I think as a franchisor, we'd be really remiss not to kind of have a close relationship with the franchisees because we need to make sure that everything we're doing strategy-wise for the business actually corresponds closely with their requirements. So we have a lot of kind of touch points with the franchisees. We have an annual conference. This year it's a bit tricky, obviously because of COVID, but last year we had it in October. We all gathered at Manchester United's football ground at Old Trafford, and that was really, really exciting. But we had a couple of hundred people gathered there, and just sharing ideas and things like that. We have forums focusing on different aspects of running the business. So we have a marketing forum, we have an IT forum, we have a coaching forum, and that's where franchisees who are particularly interested in those aspects of the business, they're able to kind of interact with the head office team and engage. We have regular forums for our franchisees. I think we have them every quarter now for the UK franchisees, where all of the franchisees, we run a couple of them because there's too many franchisees to all be able to speak on one call. But we'll have a set agenda that we'll go through, and we'll have a time within that where the franchisees can put forward their ideas and their suggestions. And we also have a support team from a head office kind of point of view, who every individual franchisee will have a member of the head office team who supports them, and they'll speak to them. Normally it's kind of every week to begin with while they're getting up and running, and then over time it kind of evolves to whatever the franchisee wants really, but typically it'll be once or twice a month that they'll speak to their head office support person. And then I'm always around to chat to franchisees if they have ideas, and I still am very engaged in kind of setting the strategy for the business, so I kind of love those interactions with the franchisees too. So there's a lot of kind of touch points that we have, but I think it's because as an organization we recognize the value in that, and actually that's the thing that helps drive our business forward.
Wow. I am absolutely amazed by just how strong of a community internally with your franchise partners you're building, and the support systems that you have. That's fantastic. So you touched on something very interesting in that you're continuing to gain that feedback from franchisees on where to expand and how to tackle things from a strategic perspective. So I'm curious, as you're expanding internationally, how has your offering and growth strategy changed from market to market, especially from like a cultural perspective as well?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's one of the hardest things, I would say, to try and get right. Obviously, there's a massive difference between the product that we offer in China versus Brazil versus the UK. So what we do typically is we have different ways of entering the markets. If it's a kind of a smaller country like Cyprus or Hong Kong, we'll have one franchisee who will run the whole island or territory. If it's a larger country, which culturally is quite different from what we're used to dealing with, for example, Brazil or China, we would have a master franchisee. And just as an example of kind of the way that we've changed what we do, when we looked at the Brazilian market, we were really keen to launch there. And the Brazilian master franchisees had actually worked for our biggest franchisee in Australia, Northern Beaches in Sydney, and they'd been his operations managers. So we knew that as a couple, they understood the business really well. But we had the challenge of trying to work out how a British/Canadian soccer company could persuade Brazilian parents, who are obviously really good at football, how to, why they would want to send their kids to our classes. So what we did was came up with an English language program. So for Brazil, our USP there really is that, send your kids to our classes, and not only will they get a really great introduction to soccer and early learning skills and early learning development, but they'll also get the opportunity to learn English as well. And that's worked really, really well. So we can roll that out into a few other countries. Then culturally, somewhere like China or Hong Kong, we found that there's been less, as we started operating there, we found that parents were less interested in the concept of sport for the sake of sport. They were much more interested in kind of, making sure that any extracurricular activities their children did promoted educational learning concepts. So what we had to do for those markets was very closely tie in what we do to the learning goals that are kind of, for kids of different age groups. So we introduced a badge scheme where every 3 months, each of our age groups are working towards a particular badge and developing a particular skill. And we can show the parents the pathway if your child signs up at 18 months, these are the various skills that they will learn until their 7th birthday. And, they're skills that you would hope that a child would develop at particular kind of ages along the kind of demographic route, if that makes sense. But we realized pretty early on in those markets, it's not enough just to say to parents, look, your child's having a fantastic time. They're going to really love sport, and hopefully this will be something that'll be with them for life. We had to actually prove to them that while they thought the children were kind of having fun and enjoying themselves, they're actually learning very concrete educational skills as well, colors, numbers, parts of the body, things like that. So it really is kind of a question, I think, of working closely with people from those local markets and running a pilot for sure, making sure we understand the market really well, and then tweaking what we do, but not tweaking it so much that it's unrecognizable from its core form and that there's no real benefit from buying a franchise, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's a really good question, and it's kind of something that, every market is different, really.
We'll get right back to the show, but do you feel frustrated trying to grow your franchise? Are you having trouble balancing your consumer and franchise development marketing? Do you wish there was an easier way? Imagine if you had a roadmap to take your franchise's marketing from costing you to making you money. That's why we've created the Franchise Growth Blueprint. To find out more, visit franchisegrowthblueprint.com. That's franchisegrowthblueprint.com. Now back to today's episode. Very, very interesting. So I imagine that some of your learnings from different markets applies to other countries and markets that you expand into.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, the badge scheme, we first introduced that in Hong Kong, but we've actually now introduced it everywhere globally. And actually, our Chilean franchisee, she's got a doctor of early years development or something, but she did a kind of focus as part of her degree on the different skills that children would learn at different ages, and she put an incredible amount of content into the badge system that we've now developed. So again, it's kind of an example of a franchisee really contributing to the network as a whole in something that we've managed to roll out to everybody.
Wow, I love that learning and camaraderie. So switching gears a bit. You're on a global scale. How did you tackle this whole crazy COVID situation?
Oh, goodness. Yeah, no, that's been really, really tough. So there were a few things that had happened that we were very lucky. And basically a couple of years ago, we started looking into a new IT system. We recognized that the system that we had was probably outgrowing its usefulness a little bit, was becoming a bit kind of clunky, and we were a bit worried about data security and things like that, particularly with all the kind of new legislation that's coming in. So we decided to look into new systems, and we decided that one of the key things we wanted our system to be able to do was monthly recurring payments. So moving from a model where we would have parents signing up for 6 or 12-week courses, and then after 3/4 of the way through the course, we'd contact them and say, would you like to sign up for another 6 or 12 weeks? So basically giving the parents the option of saying they didn't want to continue coming to classes on a pretty regular basis. We wanted to move from doing that to actually moving to a monthly recurring payment schedule. So almost like a kind of gym membership where parents would sign their child up, and then we just take the payment from their credit card every month until such point in time as they decide they don't want to come anymore. They let us know, we cancel the payment. And it kind of worked well for parents as well, because it meant they weren't continuously being kind of contacted by our franchisees as to whether they wanted to continue coming to classes and for payments, etc. So we looked into a system that could do that. We developed a new system. It's basically kind of a layer that we built on top of the Salesforce platform. And it's been fantastic. We noticed that when we launched it in the UK, it was back at beginning of 2019, our revenues, our network revenues in the UK went up by about 25%. So I think it proved to us that the monthly recurring idea had been the right thing. But what it also enabled us to do was when lockdown hit towards the end of March 2020, we were able to say to our customers, look, you're enrolled in our classes, you're on our system. How about we just put your membership on hold until such a time as we start classes up again? So you're still a member of Little Kickers. We just won't take any payments while we're not running classes. And I think of our 71,000 customers as at kind of the end of March, 69,000 of them said yes to that. And so we were able to retain the bulk of our customers. And we've opened up now again in probably about 3/4 of the markets where we operate. So that's been really, really fortunate. We've managed to keep hold of our customers, even though we weren't getting revenues in. And we were then faced with the kind of question around, well, do we want to move to online classes and get parents to, continue paying for online classes that we would deliver them, through Zoom or whatever into their sitting room at home? We kind of looked into that, but really there was a lot of free content out there that was quite good. And the prospect of trying to create content ourselves, in lockdown at home, that would compete with this fantastic free content was a little bit challenging. So what we ended up doing was we did do free content ourselves that we posted to our customers, and then we kind of expanded it so that anyone could access it who had young kids. But it ended up being myself and my son in my back garden with him doing the coaching and kind of running virtual classes. But we just sent that out for free because we didn't feel it was right to charge customers for that. And we recognized that, everyone was undergoing a bit of a financial strain at that time. So we kind of focused on continuing with the goodwill for our customers. And so a lot of our franchisees produced free content for Facebook and Facebook Lives and things like that. So it was really just kind of, how do we maintain the goodwill of these 71,000 customers who we've got signed up for our classes until such a time that we can actually start running classes again. And that's been tricky. We're kind of reopening now in a lot of different jurisdictions around the world. We're just following the government guidance in those countries. So some countries, we've only got 5 kids in every class. Most countries, we've got the social distancing thing going on. But our franchisees have been very, very kind of cautious and fastidious about the whole, sanitizing and spacing kids out and things like that. So it's starting to get back to normal, touch wood, but it's been quite a tough time for any business, I think, because there's just been no certainty and it's been very, very difficult to plan.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I love that free content approach that you're taking, because it's building brand equity, not just with your current customers, but with new ones as well, right? Because it's spreading the word out. People are stuck at home. They want something for their kids to do. And it's like, oh, hey, here's this video that I found from Little Kickers. That's great. I love it.
Thank you. No, absolutely. It was actually quite fun to produce the videos. We ended up we have a big mascot, like a big furry mascot called Lenny Kicker. Mm-hmm. And we realized that actually the kids got more engaged when Lenny was in the video. So we managed to get one of the Lenny suits dropped off at my house. And then we switched to having my daughter filming the videos, my son doing the coaching, and I was dressed in the mascot outfit, jumping around my back garden. So some of the later videos that are online, it's actually me dressed as the mascot. You can tell actually because my son's quite rude to me a lot of the time. He took advantage of because the mascot doesn't speak, so I just kind of take it when he was being rude to the mascot.
Oh, that's hilarious. So one question I always like to ask is, what advice would you give someone just starting out as a franchisor?
I think the kind of main thing, there's a lot of businesses. I mean, franchising is becoming a more and more popular concept. And I think I see quite a few businesses jumping into the market and into the whole kind of establishing a network of franchisees when they haven't necessarily completely sorted out their concept. So I think you need to have your concept sorted out. You need to have, what is it that makes your business unique and different compared to other companies? It needs to be able to run without the owner or the founder being involved in the everyday kind of day-to-day running of it. And also the financial model needs to be sound. Like if your financial model isn't sound, there is absolutely no way you're going to be able to teach someone else how to set up and run a business with the same financial model and expect them to make it successful. So on a kind of micro level, I'd say that's the kind of main thing, is making sure that the actual business you're expecting other people to be able to set up and run is a solid business that has a good financial basis and, is replicable and something that somebody else would be able to set up.
So would you recommend having a few corporate locations first before even touching the franchise side?
Absolutely. I can't really see how you would make a success of it unless you've done that, because you need to prove that the financial model works, I would say, before you can sell it to somebody else. I think it's a bit irresponsible not to go down that route, to be honest. Yeah.
Totally. So, Christine, we're coming up at the end of our episode, and the way that I like to end all of them is with something that I call the lightning round. So, don't worry, it's no hard questions, very light stuff. So, the first question is, what is your favorite tool or app that you cannot live
Um, God, that's a really good question. Do you know the one I use the most, and this is really sad because it's so old school, but I am on Facebook a lot of the time. Yeah, I'm friends with every single one of our franchisees. I'm probably the number one fan of most of them. And every day, first thing in the morning, I go onto Facebook, like everything that any of our franchisees post, and then same in the evening. So Facebook probably, although actually over the lockdown Zoom, we always used it actually before COVID, but that's also kind of one that I think would be hard for our business to live without because we all work remotely. We don't have offices, everyone works remotely. So Zoom has been critical to the running of our business. So yeah, Zoom or Facebook.
Cool. Second question is, what is your favorite book?
Cool. That's a really good question. Business book or
any book?
I really like Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer. It's a book about mountaineering, and it's kind of, but I just love that book. It's a very, very well written book, and I've read it over and over again.
Awesome. I'll have to check it out. Next question is, who is the franchise founder or leader that you look up to most?
It's a good question. I wish you'd pre-warned me about these and I could have given them a bit more thought. I think the leader, certainly the person who's been probably most helpful to me in franchising, I would say is Nina Moran Watson, who's actually our lawyer, which is kind of a weird choice, but she's a real fixture in the UK franchise world. She's been our lawyer since day one. She's been incredibly helpful with just general advice around building the business in addition to legal advice. And yeah, I'd say she's probably been one of the most instrumental people. Also, Sarah Kelly, she's no longer with Stagecoach, but she's been a fantastic mentor to me as well. I'm really, really grateful to her. So yeah.
Cool. And last question, I promise this is an easy one. Where can people find out more about you and your company?
Probably the best place would be either my LinkedIn, which is Christine Kelly, or the main Little Kickers website, which is littlekickers.co.uk, or littlekickers.ca links into that as well.
Awesome. Well, Christine, thank you so much for coming on the episode. You shared a ton of information that I know myself and our listeners truly appreciate.
Lovely. Thanks so much, Jordan. It was really nice to meet you.
All right. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Franchise Marketing Podcast. If you found this episode useful, share it with a friend and subscribe now so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. And until then, happy marketing.